everybody wants to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
Today we're traveling across the world from the rooftops of Sao Palo to the back alleys of New York to uncover the top 5 most iconic graffiti tags on Earth. And these aren't just tags. These are how graffiti artists interpreted letters and used that to build a culture and identity for their area in graffiti. So let's hop into it. This is the story of graffiti styles that shaped the globe. Number 1. Philly hand styles. Visually, the Philly hand style is known for dense flowing tags that come in a variety of different styles. Some that fan outwards, while others are tall and lanky. To outsiders, many Philly tags look like wild scribbles, but experienced eyes see a coherent structure. They're able to see the letter through all the style being imbued into the name. Well-executed Philly hand styles balance letter structure with negative space. And no matter how much style they add, when it's well executed, even though these letters might overlap and interlock with one another, the underlying alphabet is still there. And this is a controversial kind of hand style because there's plenty of graffiti artists out there that don't like these tags at all. They find them nearly impossible to read, and admittedly when they're not well done they certainly can be, while others simply just don't have a preference for these kinds of different Philly hand styles. But it's no secret, Philly tags might be one of the most popular regional hand styles in existence, and one of the most loved regional hand styles in existence. So while there is a sect of people that don't like them, there is far more that aspire to have their own Philly hand style, even if they live on the opposite side of the earth. And while we're talking about the other side of the earth, we can travel over to Sao Paulo. In Sao Paulo, a strikingly different hand style developed called this word right here. I'm not even gonna try and pronounce this. I got no idea how to say that. And this style of tags began popping up roughly between the 1940s as political statements and political slogans, evolving from there in the 1980s, being used more for your typical graffiti purposes. Visually, these tags look nothing like other forms of graffiti, even contrasting other forms of tags. Though they do share some similarities with Philly hand styles as far as their appearance is concerned, which, strangely enough, Philly hand styles also don't look like many other styles out there. But they use almost exclusively dark black lettering. They also often feature jagged angular letter forms. The letters are typically tall, narrow, and equally spaced, which is the reminiscent part back to Philly hand styles, which can also be tall and narrow. Now, because writers want to aim for maximum reach when using these hand styles, their tags can climb the faces of skyscrapers and walkways. Crews even use extension poles to tag high up buildings. And for that reason, because of the purpose that these hand styles have, they're more than just the average hand style. Simply doing the tag is a lot more intensive than just the ordinary hand style, and often a life-risking challenge. Now, learning these regional styles is only possible if you first learn graffiti's fundamentals. Without knowing graffiti's basics, you are gonna struggle to get better. So why not check out our How to Do Graffiti book in the description down below. It's the only book on the market that goes over each one of graffiti's fundamentals, and it has hundreds of pictures that hold your hand through the process, making it perfect for brand new graffiti artists getting into the art form, but also goes into extreme depth that you can't find anywhere else, making it perfect for even experienced graffiti artists. Pick up a digital copy over at theartistblock.inc or check out a physical copy over on Amazon. I got a link to both of those in the description down below. Moving back over to the United States, we have the Cholo styles, a very distinct form of graffiti that is beloved even to this day. Los Angeles gave birth to the Cholo style, a style of lettering traditionally rooted in Mexican-American Chicano gang culture. These tags started off as gang writings, used to mark territory. But over time, as things progressed, you had some gang members that might have done graffiti or some graffiti artists that might have gotten into gangs, and these tags, these markings, became more stylized, turning what was once used just simply to mark territory into something that became its own distinct font. And a lot of this growth can be attributed back to Chaz. Some people have described the Cholo styles to be categorized by ornate calligraphic writing, which heavily contrasts New York, especially back then when things were kind of kicking off, where New York's styles tend to be very blocky, even in their hand styles, or more round with their throwies. Cholo styles, on the other hand, typically look like flowing Old English, with a little bit of style sprinkled in there. Writers favored angular flourishes and sharp serifs. The forms are influenced by Mexican-American culture elements, for example, Catholic tattoo art. In practice, a Cholo tag might feature dramatic swashes, extended line ends, and precise curves that recall cursive or tattoo fonts, all executed with meticulous control. And this whole entire style really is like a Los Angeles phenomenon. While beloved and widely known about, it's not really a style that people try to emulate as globally as something like the Philly or New York hand styles. From there we travel on to France. Now, to be upfront with this one, I almost didn't put this on the list, and I think as we go through this, you guys might see why. However, I do think there is value to bringing this specific place up, because while it may not not have as distinct of letter forms as Philly handstyles or Sao Paulo, it shows a different side of the same coin. You see, in Paris, graffiti arrived in the 70s, highly inspired by graffiti from New York. Now, admittedly at the time, graffiti had already hit Paris, similarly to what we saw in Sao Paulo as well as California, but it's around this time where we begin to see a bit of a shift, a bit of a change. Early French graffiti was mostly simple tags and signatures done in cursive. And although their train scene might not have been what New York had, they made the most out of what they did have and put a heavy emphasis on their metro as well as on walls. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, in the early days of New York graffiti, tagging walls was considered toy. If you weren't doing trains, you were considered toy. France in their early days seemingly did not have that issue, and they didn't care in the slightest. It didn't take long for crews to take root in Paris, and over the 1980s, local crews and riders flourished. Now, throughout the history of graffiti in the area, their graffiti always heavily reflected the fine art in the area as well, being heavily influenced by the art scene. Now, this adherence to your typical script fonts for their graffiti, while it wasn't necessarily unique and it wasn't necessarily something that has never been seen before at that time, their dedication to it was unique, as to where other areas had either developed their own style or stuck to the more blocky New York style. This area, for a time, stuck to that more script style, which is credited due to the heavy fine art influence within the area as well. And by 1981, Paris took a different turn with their graffiti. People like Black Lorette, for example, amongst others, became really big names in Paris. And we saw a lot of notable figures in the street art community come from the area. And this natural proclivity towards that more fine art discipline, I believe, is what really inspired a lot of street art in Paris at the time, which was something that Paris had plenty of notable street artists that came out of the area, especially back then when doing that wasn't nearly as popular. But by the mid-1980s, Paris had begun developing its own lettering flavor that wasn't too dissimilar from other things that we had seen, but still unique enough for them to call their own. Historian Jessica Stewart notes, Brando developed a style of letters that gave birth to the European school of graffiti, which according to her allowed for European graffiti to begin looking more distinct from the American styles, finally separating themselves from what America was doing. Now, nothing against Bando, I'm not sure how much I agree with that. Looking at Bando's work and other works from around the time, they still very much look reminiscent of graffiti's styles and not distinct enough to define it as themselves. And I believe that this whole entire thing with Paris graffiti shows us how graffiti can happen in a totally different location and still take a very similar path as graffiti did in New York. Now, part of the reason I was hesitant to put Paris on the list here was because they also had a massive emphasis on street art, which doesn't really fit this list as we're talking about tags here. So while street art isn't necessarily the kind of graffiti that we think of when we think of graffiti, I think including Paris in a list like this is important because we get to see how an area took graffiti and their influence from fine art and kind of found a little middle ground between the two. Now, lastly, we've got New York styles, often seen as the originator of graffiti, if you will. While it wasn't necessarily the first instance of graffiti, it's where graffiti's rules, ethics, community, and culture was born, grew, and expanded to a global level. As we saw with Paris, it's New York that inspired others to really get into graffiti. And we would have seen the modern day types of graffiti start anywhere from in the late 60s and 70s, debatably the 1940s, depending on where you want to draw that line for modern day graffiti. At first, beginning with just your average basic print font tags, you had people like Taki183 beginning to tag their name around the city. At this point, the tags were nothing fancy, and throwies and pieces didn't really exist. But the access to trains was really the catalyst for the graffiti takeover, allowing for graffiti artists to tag something that would then move across the city and allow everyone it came in contact with to see their name. People like Tracy168 took full advantage of this, pioneering the idea of hitting your train and having that travel for you. Very quickly, graffiti evolved into pieces and throwies that would don the side of trains, massive murals even, that were whole cars long, incorporating not only letters, but also full-fledged backgrounds and characters. Graffiti to this degree was never seen in this way. It was never as impactful, and its influence impacted everybody. Everybody from graffiti artists that were doing it to the average person that just took the train to work, or the average person that never took the train but still got to see it in public. A public free gallery, if you will, available for all to see, but not all enjoyed. Many people hated graffiti. They couldn't stand the sight of it, thought it was horrendous and hideous, but this only fueled the more rebellious nature of graffiti. The idea of trespassing into areas, the idea of going out at night, sneaking around and having this alter ego, this second life that you lived that nobody knew about, this more underground community where you weren't marking territory for a gang, you weren't making necessarily political statements, but you were making pieces of art that had your name, your signature right beside it, where you would do tags of your tag name specifically for people to recognize it, learn it, and introduce yourself to the world. Everything from the trains itself to the markers we used helped define the graffiti styles. The real blocky letters that were created with chisel tip markers, all the way down to needing to do your name quick on a train, but still large enough to see at a distance. It's circumstances like these that allowed us to make throwies, who utilize rounder, more simple structures to allow us to do the letters faster and at a large scale. While pieces, on the other hand, just became fatter versions of tags that were able to take up the entire side of a train if need be, allowing them still able to be seen from a distance. These are 5 different styles of graffiti from around the world, but there's plenty more out there, so feel free to let me know some of your favorites in the comments down below. And if you guys want to learn this beautiful art form and you want to make that process as easy and as simple as possible, check out our How to Do Graffiti book in the description down below. We have digital ebooks over at theartistblock.inc with physical copies over on Amazon. It's the only book on the market that'll teach you all the fundamentals you need to know to develop your style and get out of the toy phase. If you want some How to Do Graffiti tutorials, check this out right up here. And if you want just more graffiti content, we got a playlist down here for you. I'll catch you guys back here next week. Thank you for watching.